So just briefly, it's 12 o'clock, which is sort of the time to start. My name is Denny Mullen. I'm a local AFCEA chapter member and volunteer to make sure nobody gets in a fight, squabbles, and the end of the time, and somehow answer questions in an appropriate manner. I guess it's my job. I didn't get a job description. I'm also chairman of the local IEEE society. And those of you that may not be familiar with IEEE, it turns out our regular monthly technical meeting is over at the Canal Museum, and it's no cost, and people are welcome to attend. And the subject is probably one that fits with everybody that serves. Cyber agencies using virtual environments. So we have a principal consultant from Red Hat that's presenting tonight to talk about sets of tools and how you create this virtual environment so that you can play with all kinds of defensive environments in a training environment. So if you're interested, stop by. I'll tell you where the Canal Museum is, and you'll be welcome. So then I'm going to stop because this is really about Matt Brent's talking about an environment that you all can hear about.
Good afternoon. So my name is Matt France. I'm one of the technical trainers at Fortinet. I'm going to start off quickly just kind of asking how many people here are actually familiar with Fortinet? A little, okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's kind of a start. So Fortinet, I'll give a quick background. I don't have any slides on it as far as a corporate overview, but we are a cybersecurity company, network security, so we make firewalls, wireless access point switches, DDoS tools, anti-malware tools, web application firewalls, anything you can really think of when it comes to cybersecurity, network security. We have about 45 to 50 products total in our portfolio. So it's a large company. I think it's about $1.5 billion in revenue now. We've been around since 2001, about 6,000 employees worldwide based out of Sunnyvale. So definitely a big-sized company. We've been around for a while doing this stuff. One of the big challenges that a lot of people have, obviously, in their networks is you got around 30, 35 different vendors within their data center, and how do you get them all to work together? How do you get them to communicate with each other? It's a huge challenge, and something that Fortinet's been doing for a long time, and something we've been trying to really strive for, is this concept of security fabric. Making our products work together and leverage this whole solution to network security rather than individual point products, solving just one problem at a time, but not having any kind of visibility across the entire network. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is the security fabric. We're going to go through a lot of the different products. We'll talk kind of at a high level. We'll probably talk a little bit about the challenges that customers are facing today. We'll introduce a little bit about the security fabric, what it is, go into some of the details on the various components, and then I've got a couple slides at the end to talk about some of our customers. So just quick FYI at the end, this slide deck is going to be about 45 minutes. I try to be as interactive as possible, so by all means, raise your hand, ask questions. I like having questions. Stump me if you can on Fortinet products, that is. But definitely ask questions and be interactive. This will last about 45 minutes. At the end of this, we step into a hands-on lab. So hands-on lab does require a laptop with wireless access. Hopefully that was made aware to everybody. Unfortunately, there's only like 2 outlets that I've found in the room so far. They didn't run power extension cords, so hopefully we can get everyone some power if you need it. But the hands-on lab will take about an hour and 15 to an hour and a half to get through. So digital transformation. I will start out quickly by saying that this slide deck is definitely geared much towards enterprise organizations, commercial organizations, small business, medium business, that type of stuff. I really don't have anything specific to government contractors or federal or the Army and stuff like that. But for the most part, it is consistent. The messaging is consistent depending on the industry or all industries for the most part. It is network security. We're trying to obviously secure everything and anything. So digital transformation in the commercial world, a lot of companies are trying to move to this digital world. Web applications going online, mobile apps, things like that. Just communication is happening much more frequently on the internet. Less about paper and pen and that kind of stuff. So companies are trying to move to this digital transformation. They're trying to stay up to speed with their competition. right? That's a big challenge. If someone else is doing it and they're making, more profit by doing it, you're going to lose on your profit, so you got to catch up and do the same thing. So a lot of companies are really moving towards this digital world, and that's the future of a lot of businesses. But the challenge there is, as you move to the digital world, how do you keep up with the security? And so there's this security transformation that's also happening, where it's no longer an afterthought of, well, we built this really great tool, now we have to secure it. The thought process is much more, okay, we're going to build a tool, how do we integrate security into it? How do we make sure that the tool and the application is secure from the ground up, right? So security transformation is a big topic as well. So some of those key customer challenges that a lot of people face, right? Broad. The network is incredibly broad. There's a lot of products out there, right? Gartner or Verizon, I think, at one point had kind of determined that there's about 32 different vendors typically on average in most customer data centers. And it's a lot of products, it's a lot of vendors, a lot of tools that have to work together. And having that broad set of tools, you lose out on the integration, right? So tools aren't always working together. Vendors see themselves as competition to each other, and so they don't want to work with each other. They want to obviously have their products in your data center, but they may not have all the products necessary to cover an entire data center, right? Without that integration, you lose out a lot of the automation between tools at the same time, right? So even if you have some integration, if you have some visibility, SIM, right, security incident management, event management systems and stuff like that, they see a lot of different things, but how do they automate in order to fix something across the entire network, right? So that's a challenge there as well as the automation side. So what Fortinet does is we try to cover all three of these topics, right? We have a very broad selection of tools, like I mentioned before, about 45 to 50 products in our portfolio. We integrate between them all through an AI engine. So things like our FortiGate Firewall and our sandbox tool. If the sandbox tool determines that there's something malicious happening on the network, a file that's detected maybe on an endpoint or through a SIM tool, it can actually create a signature on the fly and push that signature out to all of our FortiGate firewalls across the entire enterprise, literally within seconds. So now we have a 0-day signature that's been created on the fly across the entire network. Right, and this isn't just the data center anymore. Now we talk about branch offices, remote offices, things like that. Cloud, right? You've got Azure, AWS, GCP, all those clouds. We have FortiGate VMs that run up there. So again, the integration of having everything working together as a full solution is very powerful. And then on the automation side, a little bit of that with the sandbox, right? But we have also got things like our Fortinet product that allow, as devices getting connected to the network, they're automatically being scanned for what kind of operating system they are. Are they up to date on signatures for their AV engine? What kind of activity is actually happening with that device? And we're able to feed that information even back up to our analyzers and our FortiGate firewalls and the SIM tools and things like that. So a lot of automation is happening throughout the entire fabric, that you don't have to sit there and manage every single bit of it. So on the broad side, right, we've got a lot of different things. Network security, we're going to talk a little bit about our MultiCloud security, application security, secure access, endpoint. We've got APIs for not only our products, but then we integrate with the APIs of other products that we call Fabric Connectors. I'll jump into a couple of these. All right. So NGFW solution. We've got next-gen firewall built right into the FortiGate, so you've got all your IPS engines. We've got one of the largest sets of IPS engines actually built into our FortiGate firewall that rivals a lot of IPS-only solutions, right? But as part of the NGFW solution, you've got your security policies, your inbound, outbound access lists, right? You've got the IPS engine running on top of it. You've got an AV engine running inside the FortiGate firewall as well. What else? We've got... Well, IPS, what is it? Web filters in there, AVs in there. I haven't logged into my FortiGate in a while. IPS, email. There's actually an email filter built in there as well. So all these different tools in the NGFW engine. You also have SSL inspection. So a lot of firewall vendors out there claim to have SSL inspection, but then they don't always work. or they work, but they're very CPU intensive. So you have a box that might be able to do 1 gig of throughput on the firewall side, but as soon as you turn on that SSL inspection engine, it drops to like 30 megabit of traffic inspection, right? So our firewalls, we use our secure, our stock chip. We have our CP, our content processor. We have our NP, the network processor. And then on our smaller end units, we have our stock processor, system on a chip, or security on a chip. Basically, we design our own ASICs. We've been doing this since the beginning. Our CP processor is on its 9th generation. Our NP is on its 6th generation. And our stock chip just came out with this 4th generation. So we're able to achieve, using the CP chips and the NP chips, when we say you've got a firewall that can do, let's say, 1 gig of inspection on regular firewall, you turn on that SSL inspection, you may only drop down to about 600 megabit. So it's still a very, very powerful chip. Same time, using the NP processor, we can take regular firewall traffic at a price point where, let's say, a competitor is at $10,000 and they can do 10 gigabit of throughput. Our $10,000 firewall does about 50 gigabit of throughput. So it's a much different scale when it comes to processing power there in the NGFW using those ASICs. Segmentation. This is also a very common problem a lot of companies have when they want to segment their network. A lot of networks still tend to be very flat, just one big broadcast domain. Their servers are in the same area as their public web servers maybe. Their endpoints are all on the same network, right? And so you want to create the segmentation. You want to move your database servers away from your web servers so that they're actually segmented from each other. You want to move your email servers away from your Active Directory servers, right? You want to segment the network. But how do you do that in a way that you can still get that high capacity between each of them as if they were on the same broadcast domain? Again, it comes back to those ASIC chips, right? Being able to process at high speeds. So our segmentation firewalls are able to do that as well. And that's actually, any of our firewalls are technically considered a segmentation firewall. It just depends on the size of your network. Even our smaller $500 boxes, our 60F firewall, can do about 2 gigabit of throughput, and that's east to west traffic. So if you, even on a small enterprise or a small business of 20, 25 users, you can still do full line speed segmentation. SD-WAN. This afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit more about SD-WAN. I'm not sure how many people have signed up for that class as well. But SD-WAN is a built-in function of our FortiGate firewall as well. All right, so it's not an add-on solution. It's already there. It's integrated right in. SD-WAN being the ability to use multiple internet connections to balance traffic based on whether it's uptime. You know, if one ISP is up, the other one's down, we can flip that. But we can also take things like we want all of our Amazon traffic to go out one interface. We want all of our YouTube traffic to go out another interface, right? So we can split traffic and actually leverage all ISPs. There's really no limit to the number of connections we can merge together into a single SD-WAN. I think I've seen theoretical deployments of upwards to about 4,000 interfaces, all part of a single SD-WAN configuration. You can do VLANs, VPN tunnels, anything you can think of that's classified as an interface within the firewall, we can add into that SD-WAN configuration. So that's a fully baked in and built-in feature. So as far as SD-WAN, our marketing people really wanted us to throw in the what's new slide here. I will say that FortiOS 6.2 has been out for almost a year. So this isn't really new features. It's still the latest version of what we have, so we kind of classify it as that. But we do have some stuff like forward error correction. So if you're sending packets over 2 VPN tunnels, we can actually send duplicate packets to make sure that the transmission isn't getting lost. So that's a newer feature. Dual VPN tunnel wizard. So as we're building our SD-WAN configuration, we can actually build the VPN tunnels on the fly and be able to leverage both VPN tunnels in a single SD-WAN configuration. Kind of a cool feature. Interface-based traffic shaping, so we can actually shape traffic based on its application type over certain interfaces, which is also a cool new feature. We've got a few new traffic shaping enhancements that were added in, as well as things like scheduling certain traffic shapers, and then just some of the rule definition they've improved upon a little bit. So, you know, probably not many, if any, of you are familiar with the old way, so this is all new, I guess. All right, so on the visibility and control side, we talk about some of the different things like SaaS visibility and control. How many people here are using SaaS solutions? I should probably expect everybody's hand to be up at some point. Even if it's something like a DNS provider, using Google for your DNS, that's technically considered a SaaS solution, right? Email being hosted in Office 365 would be a SaaS solution, right? So SaaS is a very widely used solution set. Lots of different products out there in the SaaS world. And one of the biggest challenges that customers have as they start to move their products or their services out to the cloud into these SaaS solutions is you lose out in the visibility and the control of what's actually out there. How's it being managed? Where's the data? Who accessed the data? Things like that. So using our FortiCASB products and FortiCWP products, we can actually tie into those systems using their APIs, and we can actually show you what's actually happening in visibility and control. Right? And that's, again, shared back all the way through the entire security fabric. Application security, probably one of the biggest topics that's actually happening these days, right? As we have things like email and web applications constantly coming out, new versions of it or whatever, we need to continue to secure those. Email has been around for how many years now? Decades, I guess, at this point. It's still the most commonly used form of communication within the internet world. And it's becoming more and more popular, obviously, for businesses. It's a critical piece. How do you secure it in a way that you're not going to be the next headline, right? Phishing. There was a company not too recently. There was something on CNN. I think they were just talking about a school district that lost some $2.4 million or something crazy in an email phishing scam. It still happens every single day, right? So you have to have tools in front of that email server or that email provider that can stop those phishing attacks from coming in, looking for bad links, and then being able to share that information throughout the entire organization as well. Web applications, probably one of the most underutilized security products and services out there. Web application firewalls, right? For your normal website activity, most people probably run a standard IPS engine. And that protects known threats, for the most part, based on signatures. But what happens when you have someone that fat fingers in a username onto the website and it includes an ampersand in their username? Typically, it's a no-no, right? Web application firewall would help catch anomalies like that, whereas a standard IPS engine either wouldn't find it because it's not a known signature, or it would straight out block it because they think it's a threat, depending on how the signature was written. Web application firewalls are more advanced, machine learning, AI-driven engines, so that they can look for those types of anomalies to determine, is it really an attack or is it just an anomaly of good traffic, right? So web application firewalls are a very important tool. Was that big credit company a number of years ago that got compromised? Experian, not Experian, what was it? Equifax, thank you, yes. They were attacked and breached through a known web vulnerability in their Struts engine on the back end of the server, right? So had they been running a web application firewall, or had it been tuned properly if they were running it, it would have stopped that attack, right? The core story behind that was that their Struts engine wasn't updated. It was still a few versions behind. Think of the QA process that would go through deploying a new version of a back-end service or a tool on a website like that, right? Developers have to actually determine that there is a patch needed. They have to run it through their QA process, their dev process. It has to go through the chain. They have to wait for a maintenance window. It could be months before that patch is actually released onto the production servers. Web application firewall, on the other hand, can grab signatures within minutes of them being written by the vendor, and it would protect against those known exploits immediately. An IPS engine isn't going to probably do that as well. The web application firewall is suited to do it perfectly. So, web application firewall and web security, definitely a huge topic, and I can't stress enough, people need to be looking at those if you're not already looking at them. All right, secure connectivity. So this kind of talks a little bit about like secure hybrid cloud and cloud security services hub, secure remote access. right? So we've got SSL VPN, IPsec VPN built into our FortiGate firewalls. So we really talk a lot about those. And again, with the ASIC performance, we can see very high speeds and very high performance with our IPsec engines and the SSL VPN as well. So whether it's a remote access user trying to connect in from home to the network, very fast connectivity using those, having the common interface and the common tools between your cloud deployments and your on-premise private data center deployments, creating that hybrid cloud scenario, right? We're able to create very high-speed connections, maximizing as much of your internet connection as possible. In the multi-cloud security world, some new features. Again, these probably are, everything here is new to most of you, but for those of you who are using like Azure Stack on your private data center, active passive HA is now in there. Google Cloud has a few new features. Oracle also, and a few on the AWS and Azure side. So I already talked a little bit about web applications. But on the secure web application side, right, compliance, PCI HIPAA compliance for publicly facing regulated apps, web API security for increasing publicly facing web-based APIs. So if you're running APIs for a lot of your apps, a lot of mobile apps are doing nothing more than connecting to a server API of some sort. So protecting those is a very powerful tool as well. On the secure email side, obviously widely recommended. Hopefully nobody here is running their email without a secure email gateway of some sort, but the FortiMail product specifically integrates back into that security fabric. So if you have a user that receives an email with a malicious or a suspicious link in it, we can take that suspicious link, send it off to our sandbox. The sandbox can actually call out and actually execute the website, see what happens to its local VM resources to determine if it's malicious or not. And then once it's made a determination, whether it's safe, suspicious, or malicious, it can send that response back to the FortiMail, where the FortiMail, based on its policies, can now either quarantine the email, delete the email, or send it on to the user. Right?
How quick does that happen?
I've seen it. It's on average about 90 seconds. But keep in mind, email is the type of process that we can pause in the middle, right? The only time that I've really run into an issue with it is you get a forgot password link, right? You click on that, and then the website says, oh, you got 10 minutes to click the link, otherwise we won't reset your password. If it gets hung up in the sandbox for a little bit longer because it's processing maybe too deep into the website, which is just tweaking at that point, that might take a little bit longer to get through. But for the most part, if it's something that's suspicious or malicious, it could take 3 hours. The user was never expecting it anyhow. So I'd much rather it process and make sure that it is in fact, good or bad. Right? We also have cloud versions of our sandboxing as well. FortiMail is also available in the cloud, so private data center, public data center, or hosted. We host it as well. On the SD branch side, secure access. So we do offer wireless capabilities and switching. Wireless controller and the switch controller are all built right into the FortiGate firewall. So it really becomes a single pane of glass management. You want to manage your switches and your APs and the SSIDs and the users that are accessing it. That's all done in one control panel. So it's a very powerful solution there. Being able to then deploy that out to your remote offices. Now you've got basically an entire office running off a single platform. We can use our FortiManager to bring all those different deployments back up to another single console. So now I can manage all of my switches across the entire distributed enterprise, all from one console. Same thing with the APs. So secure SD branch is kind of a general topic, talking about just bringing all those solutions together into one concept. On the Fabric API, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong slide there. All right, so on the endpoint, device and protection, this is changing a little bit for us, and I'll say that because we've had a product called FortiClient for the longest time. So actual endpoint AV has the SSL VPN application built into it, the IPsec tunnel application built into it, web application or web filter built right into it for offline filtering. It's got an application firewall built into it as well. That product's been around for a long time. It's constantly maturing and adding more functionality into the security fabric, such as talking to the sandbox tools and things like that. But we've recently just made a few more acquisitions. A company called Insilo. Anybody here familiar with Insilo? Okay, so they're a EDR endpoint tool. So they have a very, very, very small engine or collector that basically runs on the endpoint. It uses about 40 meg of RAM. It's very lightweight, runs more at the kernel level than actually within the operating system, so it's able to catch a lot more stuff, stop processes actually in their tracks. And it uses a lot of cloud functionality there as well. So that's a recent acquisition, and we're looking to actually merge all that together into a single product pretty soon. Another company by the name of SOAR, which I'm not even really familiar with yet. They're also another endpoint type tool that's getting folded in as well. So Fortinet doesn't generally do a lot of acquisitions. We've done a few more in the recent years than we had in the past. I'd probably say the first 35 products were all built from the ground up, and the last 10 or 15 have been through acquisitions. But one of the things that our founder and CEO has always strived for is if we acquire it, we're going to integrate it. We want to make sure that we don't have disparate tools or competition within our own products fighting each other. And we want everything to be part of the security fabric. So even companies like Insilo and SOAR, they were already fabric-ready partners, which I'll explain in a little bit, before the acquisition. So they already had integrations there, and now it's more of just a rebranding and then putting some money behind it to build it up some more. All right. So Fabric APIs, Fabric Connectors. So speaking of the Fabric Ready Partner Program, one of the things that we do is all of our products, or the majority of our products, specifically like the FortiGate Firewall, the Sandbox, and a few others, they all have an open API, which is kind of unusual for the security world to have a product such as a firewall to have such an open API. But what this allows us to do is this allows us to really take that concept of security fabric and integration and not only have it within our own products and tools, but expand that out to the world, right? So there are a lot of even competitors of ours that have created their applications to integrate with our security fabric. When they do that, generally, they work with our development team. They become an actual partner, a fabric-ready partner. Our development team and QA team actually works with them to make sure that it's working as expected, and then they certify it. They actually rubber stamp it, and they ensure that through versions, new future versions, that functionality will continue to work. Right? So it's not just an open API that says, good luck, and then when we update, it breaks everybody else. No, we want it to continue to work. Right? So it's a fully funded program, this Fabric Ready Partner Program. And we've got, I think, about 45 or 50 different partners that are already signed up and working on this. But on the Fabric Connector side, it's a little bit different. This is where we have companies like AWS or Azure, where we're actually integrating directly with them. So we're actually using their APIs. Another one of the fast-track classes that we have is around public cloud. And we have a FortiGate firewall that we spin up in the GCP cloud environment. And then we actually have dynamic address objects that we create based on the devices and the resources that are being built within the GCP environment. So for those of you who are familiar with GCP, imagine spinning up a new server, but then having to go and create a whole bunch of policies within the firewall in order to allow access. We could have created a dynamic object in the firewall. As soon as that server is online, it's basically already communicating to the firewall saying, I'm here, what policies do you want me to have? All right, so through tagging, we can create those dynamic policies on the fly. So it's definitely some cool stuff. So it is a very open ecosystem. All right, so I mentioned the Fabric API, Fabric Connectors, but then we've got things like DevOps. Right? So how many people here are familiar with Terraform, Ansible scripting, and things like that? All right, so good few people. So we have our own, we are a provider within Terraform. I think Ansible is there as well. I'm more familiar with Terraform myself. So we can allow DevOps teams to create tools and scripts to more dynamically deploy our products, specifically the FortiGate, into things like the GCP clouds and Azure clouds, and not have to worry about versioning different things, or it's all version controlled, basically, using those tools, right? So we're fully integrated with a lot of DevOps tools there as well. And as far as the Fabric-ready partners, right? So here's kind of a quick list of a bunch of them that are out there. This slide is a little bit old, probably about 6 months at this point, but none of these companies have dropped off the list. If anything, a few more have been added. But yeah, you can definitely see even some of our competitors. You've got like Symantec, SentinelOne, McAfee in the endpoint world. They're direct competitors of ours, but they see the value of integrating with the security fabric. So they want to be part of that. Here's a quick list of some of those fabric connectors that I was mentioning, how we integrate with third parties and use their stuff. So there's the GCP connector up there for public SDN, some Kubernetes, VMware, ESX, NSX, OpenStack, and then we've even got some third-party threat feeds down here. So there's the FBI, for example, produces a list of known bad IP addresses, right? To update that manually every day or every couple hours is kind of a pain in the butt, but you got to stay up with that kind of stuff. So by having something like this third-party threat feed, we can actually call out to that list, assuming it's publicly available through the website. Maybe it's protected behind a username and a password of sorts, but we can call out to that and actually dynamically pull that threat feed in on a regular basis. Every 5 minutes, hour, 2 hours, 24 hours, whatever you want to set for a sync cycle, right? But we can pull those feeds in. Or you might reverse it and have a list of known good addresses. Maybe you've got a team that works with a bunch of contractors, but they're not part of the security team, so they don't want to constantly go to the security team saying, "Oh, I've got a contractor, they're connecting from this IP address, please let them in," right? You can just give them access to a list that's hosted on the web server, let them add the IP addresses manually, and then the FortiGate will automatically pull that list in, and that'll be for your known good people connecting in, your known good contractors. So you can share that responsibility a little bit as well using these feeds. All right, so that was the broad concept. A lot of different products there. As you can see, there's a lot of different things that we work with and how they all work together. But now we're going to get a little bit into the integrated side and how the Security Operations Center is able to work with this. Right. So some of the different products that we have in here. So listed down here, we've got FortiAnalyzer, FortiSIM, FortiSandbox. You've probably picked up on our naming convention a little bit at this point, right? Everything we has 40 in front of it. It's kind of like Apple. Everything has an I in front of it. So our analyzer is our actual analyzer tool. So all of our FortiGate firewalls will actually feed their data, their log data, into our FortiAnalyzer, where we can run some more analytics behind it. Our FortiMail can feed analytics into it. Our FortiWeb can feed analytics into it. Basically, all of our products can feed into the FortiAnalyzer, and it will analyze all that data, provide threat feeds. It'll correlate that data. It'll do automation, so we can actually kick off scripts that may go make a modification to the firewall if we see something happen, right? You can send off SNMP alerts, syslog events to another server if you want, whatever. FortiSIM, on the other hand, while similar in the sense that it takes event data from products, it works with any product. So it's not dedicated to just Fortinet products. Right? FortiSIM actually is one of the few acquisitions we've had. It came over from a company called ExcelOps. So I don't know if anybody here is familiar with ExcelOps from the past, but that has something like 5,500 vendors or products that it works with. So you've got Cisco switches, you've got HP switches, you've got some other third-party wireless solution. You've got Tipping Point IPS engine still running in the network for whatever reason. Right? You might have all those things come together, feed that data up into a single platform, and then we can run all of our FortiGuard security services against it to find those known threats or bad actors and bad data. Right? One of the cool things about FortiSIM in particular is, unlike a lot of the competition, if they wrote a signature for it, it stays in the database and is available as a resource forever. So we've got more Cisco switches that are identified within the FortiSIM tool than within Cisco's own SIM tool. Right? Anybody ever hear about, I'll call him an idiot because he was when he did this, Guy up in Rochester, New York, was going to a security conference. He was a presenter at a conference up there, and I'm from Rochester, New York in the past, so I know about this guy. On the plane there, he decided he was going to pop in a device to the USB slot in the back of the seat in front of him, and he decided he wanted to scan the plane. He was gathering data to use in his presentation, right? I don't know what data he found. Apparently he didn't really find much because I guess the plane was pretty well secured. But the moment he landed, 2 agents walked onto the plane, escorted him, and took him to jail. FortiSIEM was the tool on the back end that detected that traffic, detected the attack, and notified the authorities so that by the time the plane landed, they already had 2 people there waiting for him. So it's a very powerful tool and works on an incredibly large scale. And then FortiSandbox, that last one down there, Bob, we've talked about that one a little bit now as well, right? Being able to take threat data or unknown threats and analyze them, whether they're files, URL links. It can search NFS shares or CIF shares if it wants to. And then, of course, responding to the incidents. Right, so that's a little bit more on the FortiSIEM side, but Analyzer does this as well. So when we actually detect something happening, we want to have an automated tool that goes out and reacts to it. So FortiSIEM can react through scripting. So you can actually write your own scripts. There's a whole bunch of scripts already built in, such as disabling Active Directory accounts. If we see multiple login attempts coming from multiple countries within a certain time span, right? If Sally, and I don't know if there's a Sally in the room, but there's always seems to be a Sally at every company. If Sally's logging in, locally at her workstation in the office, and then all of a sudden 10 minutes later she's trying to VPN in from China, probably suspicious activity, right? So SIEM is going to be able to detect that and then send off an alert maybe to the security team, but at the same time disable the Active Directory account on the fly, right? So it's very powerful in that sense. And then on the compliance side, one of the things Fortinet's really been trying to do over the years is drive much more on the compliance side. So even within the FortiGate firewall, we have a console there that will actually scan your firewall configurations and look for things like PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, and a few other, I think GDPR is now in there a little bit as well. It's not looking at the data that's passing through the firewall, but it's looking at the configuration of the firewall to determine if you're up to snuff in regards to compliance, right? But we're doing this with other tools as well. FortiNAC is doing this across the network with the endpoints and the switches and the APs. FortiSIEM is doing it to a lot of different tools and appliances, even your servers. It can scan and analyze those as well. So it's compliance is something that's very talked about a lot. Yes?
So is that using the SCAP? So you could use DoD standards or anything else that's using a SCAP protocol?
I believe so. That's not a protocol in particular that I'm familiar with. I know it, and I don't know if this will answer your question, so I may not be on the same path as you, but we can feed in things like, totally drew a blank in the name of the company. If you're running scans from another vendor like Rapid7 or something like that, there's one in particular I'm trying to think of it. Anyhow, if you've got feeds from another company, you can actually feed those reports into FortiSIEM, and then FortiSIEM can use that to help run full compliance reports. I don't know if that's quite what you're referencing or not.
Secure configuration checks.
Yes.
Can it use like STIGs from the Department of Defense? Just those STIGs.
Okay. I believe so. But I'll get you one of my cards, and we'll catch up and talk more about that. Or else I'll get you in contact with someone who can probably answer it better than I can.
Okay, great.
So, yeah. Okay. So on the FortiAnalyzer, right, automating log management, real-time threat analysis, lots of pretty graphs that kind of go along with it, so we can show where a lot of your traffic might be coming from on a world map. This one over here you can't quite see, but top 10 Wi-Fi clients. You can sort these and build graphs to your heart's content, right? If you want to look at bandwidth on a per user basis, you can do that. So there's a lot of different tools and graphs that we can build here within the analyzer for that visibility. Right? Another example, being able to drill down maybe into the individual applications, different events that are happening. And a little bit of your world map, where your threats are actually coming from. So real-time world map, threat maps, and actually watching those the packets flying across the world. And this is the security rating service. This is a little bit more in line with the PCI and DDS stuff. So built into here, we're basically scanning the configuration of the FortiGate and trying to determine, is this meeting the standards of a certain compliance. If we find something that doesn't meet, or you can click on something, it'll give you more of a breakdown. We'll see this a little bit more in the hands-on lab itself. But this screen will basically help you analyze your firewall configurations across the entire enterprise, not just one firewall at a time, but it'll look at all of them. And then at the top, you can kind of get a score, and based on your industry and the size of your organization, it'll tell you more or less what percentile you might be within the world, or what's expected. Now, obviously, these are recommendations, right? We're not going to enforce something for you. If you come and say, we want to be PCI compliant, it's not like you click a button and the FortiGate's just going to do everything. You do have to go through individually which one you want to enable or disable based on your own risk analysis. All right. So, on the automation side, and you can kind of, see the conversation a little bit here. Security Fabric being full circle. We talk about automation even back on the security operations side. We talk about automation during the broad cycle and the different products. But single pane of glass is really a big thing. Not having 50 different consoles to log into, one for every product. Trying to minimize the amount of tools that the SOC team or the network operation team has to use is a very it's a very strong point that our engineering teams have been trying to achieve there. So, FortiManager, FortiAnalyzer, FortiSIM, those tools, depending on what products you may have in the environment, you may only need one, or you may need both, or whatever. So we try to minimize, though. You don't want to log into 500 firewalls. You want to log into one console to manage all 500 firewalls. So here on the FortiManager side, we see a little bit. So you've got your FortiManager, you've got an object database. From that object database, you create your policies and objects, you manage your APs, you can manage a full VPN topology between all of your FortiGates all from one spot. Your FortiClient manager for those endpoints, you can do that from there. Your FortiSwitches, so if you have our FortiSwitch, you can manage all those configurations again from one console. Best practice compliance. So again, we've talked about this as well. Risk scoring and ranking. That security fabric, or that security rating component, it's not just to click a button and run it once. All right, that's done. That's just going to keep falling, I think. So that security rating feature will actually continuously scan the network and all your FortiGates over and over and over again. So it'll stay up to date. If you make a change on a firewall and then go back and take a look at your security rating, it should automatically update itself over time and continuously change that score. Maybe there's a new requirement that comes out, or something else changes within the environment. You add a product or add a new tool to the environment, and that changes your security rating. So you can see that security rating change over time, and you can continuously work on improving it. And then obviously on the network operations side, automation and orchestration. So we use things like the FortiManager to help automate the deployment of FortiGate firewalls, making policy changes you want to change. Let's say you've got your web filter. So you've got 25 locations. You don't want to change the web filter in every single firewall at every single location. You make it in one spot, and then you can schedule that deployment to go out at a certain time and make that change across all 25 firewalls. Right. So we try to automate and orchestrate as much as we can. And there's, obviously, with the APIs, we can use third-party tools to do a lot of that as well. So a little bit on the workflow automation. Right, so you've got system events, threat alerts, user and device status, and the external inputs. We may be able to trigger something. Let's say a FortiClient endpoint, an AV alert goes off on an endpoint. Right, so that's a trigger. The FortiGate's going to be notified that something happened. There's an AV event that's occurred. From there, we can take an action. We can adjust the configuration. Maybe we want to quarantine that endpoint automatically. So we can quarantine it through the actual Fortinet client. We can quarantine it through the switch or the access point. All right, so we can automate that full quarantine action based on a trigger that's happened. And then, of course, obviously with the actions, we have that full automated response. So the environment is doing this for us on the fly, and we don't have to have as much SOC intervention in order to make it happen. So kind of in the bigger picture, these are a lot of the things we've talked about today. Like I said in the beginning, Security Fabric is big. There's a lot of things going on there, a lot of different products that work together. But in that multi-cloud, right, you've got the FortiGate, the FortiCASB products for SaaS protection and visibility. Under the network security, you've got the FortiGate Firewall, really our flagship product that's the core of a lot of this. With those SPUs, that CP processor, that NP processor, and that SOC chip for fast acceleration. Secure access, we've got our APs, our switches. We didn't really talk about it much, but FortiToken, right? So two-factor authentication. I'll throw this out there real quick because I had to just literally do this 2 days ago. FortiToken is a free application, so you can go download it in the Apple Store or Google Store, and I'm sure there's a Windows version of it as well. I had to update my Go's Traveler account the other day, and I happened to notice that they changed their two-factor authentication type, and they wanted to get away from text messaging something over SMS, and they wanted to have a third-party application do an actual 60-second token cycle. So I went in, they had a QR code, popped up my FortiToken app, scanned the QR code, and it worked. So even using third-party tools, FortiToken is a viable option even for stuff like that with the DHS. All right. Endpoint device protection, we got FortiClient, FortiNAC, Application Security, FortiMail, FortiWeb, FortiADC. I didn't really mention FortiADC, but it is part of the Security Fabric. It's our application delivery controller. So you want to load balance layer 4, layer 7 type traffic across the network. Using the ADC, you can do that. We had a customer in my old sales region up in New York. They were going to the Oracle Cloud, and they were deploying a massive deployment of VMs up there, and it was all for like website activity and growth and expansion and whatever. But obviously they want to have a load balancer for that traffic. Oracle Cloud doesn't have a native load balancer built into it. So they looked at FortiADC, and it met all their needs. So it was able to deploy virtually into the cloud infrastructure and provide that load balancing aspect on a grand scale. FortiGates have a little bit of a load balancer, a very mild load balancer built into it. I use it in my own lab because that's all I need. ADC has a lot of security protections built into it as well with the FortiGuard security services. But it also scales. This is one of the really cool things about ADC versus FortiGate. So FortiGate has HA, right? High availability. You can cluster up to 4 FortiGates into a single cluster. You can't go beyond 4 FortiGates. We had a customer one time, they wanted to have 20 firewalls in a load balanced configuration. So we ended up putting a FortiADC in front of 20 firewalls. Why they wanted 20 firewalls, but they wanted 20 firewalls. So they load balanced across 20 firewalls. Kind of a cool story. But it's definitely a very powerful tool. That's probably one of the first acquisitions we ever did. It was Coyote Point. Anybody remember Coyote Point from 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago? All right. But obviously they've upgraded the product quite a bit since then. Security operations side, we've talked about Analyzer, Sandbox, and FortiSIM. And on the network operations, you've got FortiManager up there. So the full security fabric, kind of as it gets built, right? We cover that broad aspect, visibility in the entire digital attack surface. You've got the integrated aspect of all our different products working together through an AI-driven engine in order to identify and respond to incidents. And then you've got the automation side, allowing us to integrate with third-party tools in order to proactively react to things happening across the network and look for security ratings and compliance. All right. So I'm not a big fan of use cases. I don't know who this company is. They just kind of give me these slides to talk about. But just a couple examples in the healthcare industry. Really large example of security fabric. where they deployed basically this entire solution set, FortiGates, FortiWAN. FortiWANs are WAN load balancer. We've kind of replaced it more or less with SD-WAN built right into the FortiGate nowadays, but at the time, FortiWAN was the preferred product. FortiWeb, FortiClient, FortiAuthenticator, so our authentication services, being able to do Active Directory, identification of endpoints as users across the network, so you can write policies based on the actual user and their user group that they're a member of, rather than always looking for an IP address or a MAC address, right? Because you may have Sally who's going to log on to this computer, and then later she'll log on to a different computer, and you want to be able to make sure that her security policies are traveling with it, right? FortiAuthenticator is also the hub for our two-factor authentication tokens. So if you want to do two-factor for SSL VPN into the firewall, you want to do two-factor with your web applications throughout the entire network, you can integrate that all in with the FortiAuthenticator. Then they also got Sandbox, SIM, Analyzer, and Manager. Gemu, I think that's how you pronounce it, manufacturing company. Similar. They looked at the whole security fabric and decided that there were a couple components there that they could benefit the most from. That threat sharing between the FortiGate, FortiMail, FortiWeb, and FortiSandbox was a very powerful story for them. All right, something gets detected on the FortiWeb, gets sent to the sandbox, a 0-day signature gets written, that signature gets shared then with the FortiMail and the FortiGate at the same time. So it's full automation of threat sharing and intelligence sharing. All right, so that's it for the presentation. Any questions before we jump into the lab? It's a lot of material. I understand it's a lot to kind of digest. We'll see a lot of this in the hands-on lab as well. So for the hands-on lab, if you've got your laptop with you, and I apologize that they didn't run power at least into the middle section, but I think there might be a couple outlets there on the side. But if you open up a browser on the Wi-Fi, go to this link. You can log in, use your email address, and then the passphrase to get in is Fortinet1!! I'm going to come back to this slide here in just a second, but just to kind of show a few examples, because I'm assuming nobody here has ever participated in one of our fast-track training classes before, right? Okay, so basically CloudShare is our hosting provider for these lab environments. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Can you use Apple, right?
Yes, yeah, you can. Yep. So CloudShare is the hosting provider for this. When you log in, it's all browser-based. You're going to have a couple tabs at the top that show the different servers that you can connect into. There's one in particular called a Jumpbox server. You're going to do all of your work basically from the Jumpbox server. There's another tab there that's called Fortified. So the actual lab guide that you're going to walk through will be in one tab, and then the Jumpbox server will be in the other tab. So what we have most students do is open the two tabs in different browser windows, and then just go side by side in your screen. There's a couple other little tricks there that I'll point out that you can do to increase the resolution a little bit on it. But that way you can have the lab guide on one side and the actual Jumpbox server on the other side. Anybody still need this link? I can come back to it. Got it? Okay. Second? Yeah, I'm not sure what Wi-Fi they have here. I'm on my hotspot. Yeah. So this is a little bit of that side-by-side view that I was mentioning. So you'll have one tab that'll be this Fortified app. That's your lab guide that you'll use. And then on the other side, you'll have the actual Jumpbox server. And there will be a browser available within that that'll get you to all the different environments. One of the things that we recommend, although this slide's a little bit old, but if you've got your operating system is already set to scale at a higher level, try to back down to 100%. It'll fit more on the screen. But you can also take, if you're using like Chrome or Firefox, and you can do the scaling within the actual application. Dropping down to about 80% also really helps get more pixels on the screen so the GUI interfaces look good. Yeah, this is mostly, oh, here we go. Here's an example. So once you guys log in, you'll see like the Jumpbox server tab up there, and you'll see like the Fortified tab at the top. So those will be connecting to. So let me just go back and get that link back up there. But I'm going to walk around, so if anybody has questions in order to log in, please let me know. All right. So once you log in, here actually, you know what, let me fire this up and I'll actually share it. So this is, when you log in, this is the Cloud Share screen that you should see. Like I said, at the top you see that Fortified Lab Guide tab and the Jumpbox server. So you can click on one, and this should automatically log you right into the Lab Guide. And obviously you can put in your own name, but it doesn't really matter. But this is the actual Lab Guide that you'll walk through. Then you've got the Jumpbox server. The Jumpbox server is where you're going to actually do all the work from. But obviously cycling back and forth between tabs is kind of annoying. So what I recommend you do, duplicate that tab or the browser tab, break it out into a separate window, and then go side by side with the two. Right? So now you can have the Lab Guide on one side and the Jumpbox server on the other. If you take your browser then and start minimizing this down, you can definitely get more pixels on the screen. You can also hit this little reconnect button. It'll recycle the screen. And then down here in the very bottom of the screen, there's a little arrow, and you can hide that menu to give you even more space inside there as well. Same thing over on the other side. You can just hit the reconnect to recycle it, and then click that screen to give you more pixel space. Right. So this will allow you to work side by side, Lab Guide on one side, the actual environment on the other. If you need even more pixels, of course, you can continue to shrink down the browser if you need to. All right.